A big thanks to Churrasco Chef for sponsoring this episode.
I'm always looking for opportunities to make delicious food, but if I can save a little money, then I'm also game. And that's why we're gonna do a test. These two cuts of beef. One is my favorite picanha. It's grain-fed beef, black Angus, and it has good amount of intramuscular fat, nice red meat, little bit of a fat cap on the other side. Looks really good. Some people call it the queen and blah 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 blah. It's great, but it's rather expensive for what you're getting. What if there's another cut? Something that might taste just as good. I'm talking about the chuck steak. Hold your comments, hold your comments. There's a train of thought here. I know this is not the same thing as that. I know this is more valuable than the other one. But what if we can cook it like a picanha and it still tastes good? And you're gonna have that great experience that you have when roasting a picanha. There's only one way to find out. Let's fire up the barbecue. And this is the Churrasco Chef Boma. First I'm going to chop up some kindle out of birch wood. It's a light wood that burns real fast. Once I got a nice fire going, I am going to lay on some logs of beech wood. And while I wait for the fire to turn into beautiful embers, I'm going to show you how to make a sauce that can go with this delicious piece of meat. It starts with 100 milliliters of extra virgin olive oil, combined with 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, a tablespoon of salt, half a tablespoon of ground black pepper, a teaspoon of chili flakes, and then I'm going to add 30 grams of fresh chopped parsley, 1 tablespoon of dried oregano, finally 1 clove of fresh pressed garlic. Mix that up, and that's how you make PitmasterX's version of chimichurri. This is now one of the most delicious and famous sauces that you can make, and I fine-tuned the recipe to the way that I like it. And that's the cool thing about making things yourself. If you don't like it, change it, make it better. My version of course is on our website. You get to enjoy it, and as you can see, we still have to wait a little bit for these logs to burn down as embers. So we're going to go to the next phase to get ready for our beautiful steaks. More flavor. The steak rub. It starts with a tablespoon of finishing salt, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of ground black pepper, a teaspoon of dried parsley leaves, a teaspoon of dried chives, a teaspoon of dried thyme, and to finish it off we're going to use a teaspoon of dried rosemary. Now mix that up and your steak rub is done. Time to prepare our steaks. Traditionally, you have the picanha, and the picanha goes on a skewer like this. And then they rotate it around until it tastes freaking amazing. So I'm going to make the picanha perform to the best of its abilities. And that's why I'm going to cut this into steaks against the grain, like that, into big steaks. And these steaks are going to go onto my skewer, like that. And that's what a picanha looks like, skewered. Of course, that's not going to be the only one. I'm going to do one more steak, even in thickness. 2? 2 steaks. You're lucky today. No, not 3. All right, we'll skewer this up as well, about the same size. Now cutting against the grain is not an option here, since the grains run in all kinds of directions. See this? This is what happens with the chuck steaks. It's multiple muscles combined into one. Now let's get this onto the skewer. Both look completely different. The only thing that they have in common is the fat to meat ratio. Both have a lot of fat and a lot of tasty meat. Now what I expect is that the picanha is going to outperform the chuck steak in tenderness wise. But we're going to find out once we put them on the barbecue. But before we do, we got one last job. I'm gonna season both steaks with the PitmasterX steak rub. And both of them are gonna get a good amount of flavor on these. Salt and fat are the best friends, because when fat starts to render down, the salt comes in, takes away the moisture, and allows the fat to crispen up. And when that happens, magic happens. Oh yeah. There we go. As you can see, I have a beautiful bed of embers. And if I hold my hand above it, I'm just trying to determine where I have my 3 seconds. 1, 2, maybe here. So that means at low level we got extreme heat. Now we don't need extreme heat to start cooking this meat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the embers out of the way a little bit so we have a clear path where we can place the meat. Time to get the skewers on, one with the picanha, one with the chuck steak. I'm gonna place them on in the center. I'm going to slowly let them cook while at the same time rotating them. It's almost like a living rotisserie that we're playing at here. We're starting to get a good sear. It's been about 5 minutes or so. And if you know a thing or two about picanha, then you know it's not about the core temperature. It's about cooking the outside, getting that beautiful crust. And now you can also see why I removed the embers from the middle. If I would have let the embers sit in the middle, we would have had plenty of heat and loads of flare-ups. Now, even though I don't mind a flare-up now and then, I don't want an inferno. By removing the embers, I made sure that the ignition source was gone, and when the fat just drips and renders down, it doesn't catch fire. Ooh, yeah, baby. Now we're building up a crust a little bit. It's funny to see the difference between the picanha and the chuck steak. You can see the picanha has the classic fat cap on the outside, the meat on the sides, but you can see it has a little bit of trouble building up a crust on this side because of the amount of juice that's coming from the picanha. Whereas the chuck steak has fat all over and is starting to build up a beautiful overall crust. Of course, I want to keep going a little bit more, build up that crust even further until it looks freaking fantastic. Now we got a decent crust on both of these pieces of meat. The chuck steak was easier to build up a crust with a most even divided crust that in the end looked a little bit better than the picanha. Because with the picanha I always have parts that are sticking out. I had trouble dividing the heat evenly over the complete steak. And that's not from a lack of trying, that is just because of the way picanha is sized up. The proof is in eating the pudding, so we're going to take our picanha and we're going to slice into it. Let's take a look on the inside. Oh, that is why we love picanha so much. Do I really believe chuck steak can defeat this? I don't know, man, I don't know. Picanha has some pretty serious points scored here. Oh, that steak rub, if you haven't tried it yet. Fat cap, juicy, tender, tasty, it has everything. But really no surprise there. The picanha performed really well, and it's time to see how the chuck steak does. Ooh, let's slice into it. Ooh, nice, juicy meat, surprisingly good looking. Look at that, juice is running. Oh, that is more juices than picanha. Maybe a little bit more, but definitely more. Look at how juicy. Is this going to change the world as we know it? That is seriously tasty. It's definitely not as tender as the picanha, but this is seriously tasty. Does it replace picanha? No, it's never gonna replace picanha. However, this is scoring some serious point. It's not that tender as picanha, but it's okay tender. You can eat it like a steak. But the crust and the flavor are better than picanha. And I never thought I would say that, but it's true. More flavorful. And that's saying something. Should you forget about picanha? Well, maybe picanha for Christmas and chuck steak for any other Sunday. Something like that. Oh. Personally, I love a little bit of chimichurri, because if your steak is fatty, then you have chimichurri to balance out the fat.